CWPA Remote Professional Edition, where we take a look at water polo players and where they are today.
This man was a member of the Yale University men's water polo team in the early 80s. After graduating with a double major in English literature and theater studies, he returned to Yale and its School of Drama to get his master's in fine arts. He then carved out an extremely successful career in television and film production before making a career change 15 years ago. I'm so very pleased to be joined today by Peter Marshall. Peter, thanks so much for appearing on CWPA Remote.
Oh, George, it's a pleasure. It's great to meet you virtually.
Well, great to meet you too. Someday in person.
Yeah,
so,
someday.
How and why did you end up choosing Yale?
Good question. Part of it was Frank Keefe. I was a swimmer, and I was in his first recruited class. He made a big impression on me, as he did a lot of people when I was in high school, and part of me wanted to swim with Frank. Also, I had this mistaken idea that I would study classics in college. I studied Greek and Latin in high school, and Yale has, and always it has for many, many decades, one of the greatest classics departments in the world. I probably didn't do that when I got there, but that figured in. And I just like the Gothic stuff. I don't know why.
Okay, so water polo wise, do you remember your very first practice?
You know, it's funny because back in those days, swimmers were not allowed to play water polo. I swam for Joe Burnell, and if he found out you played water polo, he kicked you off the team. Frank was slightly more indulgent, but there was no chance to play water polo. I was a 400 IMer, so I was just overtrained to the point of near death. So, you know, the idea, we would play water polo maybe in the spring a little bit, you know, and before training really started, and I just loved it. I mean, it was a breath of fresh air from, you know, looking at the bottom of a pool. But my first real water polo practice was at the New York Athletic Club in my junior year of college. Where things really changed after, you know, 80, and we didn't go, and I wasn't at that level, but, you know, there was no point in just staying and swimming if I could have a couple of years to learn how to play water polo a little. So I jumped definitely into the deep end, and because I was pretty quick, they let me play with the A team in a practice, and it was completely overwhelming and frankly depressing.
So do you remember your first game for Yale?
I do, you know, and I really wasn't a very good player, and we had some terrific players. And I remember, you know, and I heard this a lot in my career, just get the ball and pass it. And
go for the swim off, right? Give us 4 extra attacks a game.
I won the swim off by like 3 strokes, and I was a good breaststroker. So, you know, kicking off, I got the ball and I, you know, threw it back and went down to the 2, and pretty much, I think I swam about 5,000 meters that game. I touched the ball 4 times at the beginning of each quarter.
Well, and how about your first goal?
Wow. You know, it was a garbage goal.
And, you know what? They're all just ticks on a piece of paper, or today just an X in an electronic box.
Right. It was funny because, you know, I fast broke and was way ahead, but I did what I was told, which was pass the ball back to Tom Welsh, who could actually shoot. And Tom barred down, and I just swam the ball into the goal.
Hey, you were at least aware enough to be there and get there quickly to put it in.
There was no one anywhere near me. I'm sure if there was, I might not have done it.
Yeah. Well, a nose for the goal is a good thing. So looking back over your Yale water polo career, is there a single best memory?
You know, some of them were not in the water. I remember team dinner at the end of my junior year, the first season that I played, and a couple of the really good players, you know, saying, you know what, you actually turned into a water polo player, and I felt part of a new group. So that was a great evening. I think, you know, there were a couple of games up at Brown in a tournament that we played in, I guess it was Easterns, where I actually felt like I understood the game, and I had a couple of assists, and I got the ball a lot to other people. But I felt like I'd actually been part of a team, and as a swimmer, that's an extraordinary feeling.
And any disappointments along the way with the water polo involvement?
Not really at Yale so much, because I was really just starting. I suppose the disappointment was that the team had been moved down to club level, and so we lost a coach, and I needed a coach. It's generally great. It's, as you know, George, it's a high skill game that you really need to grow up playing to be really proficient at, and it took me well into my 30s to become a proficient water polo player. So I don't really, that's my only regret, that I didn't really have coaching at Yale.
Well, good for you for sticking it out and continuing to play, into your 30s and later. So, I mean, finally, the last thing on your Yale water polo career, I'd love, and I'm sure our viewers would love to hear some general reflections on your career with the Bulldogs, and especially if there were any really amusing or unique stories during your time with the Bulldogs.
Well, I had a great experience with the teams. There were some really terrific players. And they had been well coached. Many of them were from Southern California, or several of them. And it was really an honor to play with people that put up with me and were so generous. I do remember, being really overwhelmed the first couple of games. And I think we played Harvard, and I had the ball taken away from me a couple of times. And, it was humiliating and frustrating, and you just sort of want to disappear and have no one see you. But my teammates never, got on me. They never made me feel bad, so that by the third quarter of that game, it's like, well, what worse could happen, And I started playing with a little bit more confidence. And I think it was because my teammates didn't get on me that I improved in that game. And I remember it very well, because it couldn't have started worse. And it ended up pretty darn well. So, I've carried that memory with me, and it taught me about not getting on people too. It's real easy in water polo. I played in Southern California for 14 years and saw a lot of somewhat ungentlemanly behavior. But I didn't experience that at Yale. They were really cool people to play with.
Well, that's certainly a great memory. Before we get into your current situation, how and why did you get into the business side of Hollywood?
My friend Paul Giamatti likes to tell me that my whole career has been one slow slide to the dark side. So I started.
So you'll have to explain that.
Yeah, well, I started going sideways at Yale and getting into theater, and I had to take an acting class with Nikos Sakaropoulos to go forward. Nikos was a great acting teacher at Yale, but he was the founder of Circle on the Square on Broadway and the Williamstown Theater Festival, which is the closest thing our country's ever had to a national theater. And I had this idea that I'd be a writer, but Nikos said to me, "No, don't put words in other people's mouths till you can do it yourself." And he kept hiring me. And so I finished Yale as an actor. I had a double major in English and theater studies. And I ended up going to London and studying at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art as an actor, because I really wanted to just get out of the States and see some of the world. And they let me in and helped me, enroll there. And I ended up really loving it over there, and I worked there for a while. When I came back to New York, I did what actors do. I worked on soap operas. I worked on Saved by the Bell. I worked on, some stuff that was even worse than that stuff, and did some theater. And I thought, I might as well audition for the Yale School of Drama. A master's degree might be a good idea. And I was sort of plateauing. I was doing okay. I was making a living, but I kind of wanted to, ramp it up a bit if I could. And crazy buggers let me in.
Hmm.
So I went to the Yale School of Drama as an actor and had a great experience there. I played some water polo with the team.
Mm-hmm.
I played over in England a little bit and really enjoyed that. But when I got out of the Yale School of Drama, I had a pretty good year. I was in a play that went to Lincoln Center, and I was in the pilot of Law and Order. I was sort of the Bernard Getz character in a subway shooting with Chris Noth, who had finished the
Mm-hmm.
drama school a couple of years before me. And I thought, well, that show's never going anywhere, which showed just how smart I really was.
Uh-huh.
I remember finishing that year and everybody saying to me, wow, what a great year. And I remember thinking to myself, I only worked 27 weeks. I'm going up the walls with boredom. I mean, what am I going to do? Learn another language, another instrument? And I thought, if this is a great year, if this is going to be a rough life, and people had warned me that I might have been a good actor, but I probably didn't have that thing that allows you to just swing from vine to vine and not know what's coming next and deal with downtime and uncertainty. And, right about that time, just to make a long story short, I was offered the opportunity to work on a film while I was doing a play at the Yale Rep. So I ended up, helping that production. And a year later, the executive producer called me and said, the movie's really turned out really well, and I'd like you to come out to Los Angeles and think about working at my little company where we like to make art house movies, and like you to bring in some of your buddies and friends, writers, to make these little pictures. It's for this not quite TV network, not quite movie studio called Home Box Office, and I think it's going to work. And I thought to myself, that's a stupid idea. Again, just great instincts. But I did it. And I moved to LA, which I really wasn't in love with and didn't care for. But, the idea of making these little movies for HBO seemed like a good idea. And made a bunch of them, and for Showtime. And somehow, a little circumlocuitously, one of the studios asked me if I wanted to become the head of television. I said, I don't know anything about running a television division. They said, perfect, nobody does. So I became the head of production for Trimark Pictures, which is an independent studio that had done, some schlocky stuff and some very good stuff toward the mid-90s. They brought in some really terrific art house film executives. And I was fortunate enough to be there in a real sort of Camelot period of the studio. And I got to make, pictures like Noah Dearborn with Sidney Poitier and Diane Wiest and Mary Louise Parker. And I remember Vanity Fair calling it the greatest too good for TV movie ever made. And I thought, well, it's all downhill from here. Mm-hmm. And I was sort of thinking, well, this has sort of run its course because TV movies were dying. They were being turned into movies of the week that were, I just call them I Married My Rapist movies. They were just dreadful. Mm-hmm. Female in Jeopardy movies that made no sense. And, I was trying to rescue feature film scripts and make, I actually did a couple with Kirstie Alley that were really good. And she had just come off Cheers. And, I thought, well, maybe this is the end of the run. And then Lionsgate bought Trimark. Mm-hmm. And they promptly fired me because they wanted someone else to run television. But then they offered me the job to be second in feature films. And I said, oh, I take it all back. Sorry.
Yeah.
And, and so I did that for a while and I enjoyed it. It was a different Lionsgate. It was pre blood porn, as I would call it. They were making, art house independent films, very taboo sometimes. We were the anti-Miramax, Monsters Ball, Monster, anything with the word monster in it, but not an actual monster.
Yeah.
Um, and I got to make a picture that I was very proud of called Liberty Stands Still with Linda Fiorentino and Oliver Platt and Wesley Snipes. And unfortunately, it would have come out right after 9/11.
Mm.
And so it was deemed to be too um, disturbing. Um, and if you ever see the film, I think it had the most showings in the history of HBO and Cinemax. Liberty Stands Still. It's a very good picture, and but I transitioned and became a producer after that, and I had a good run. I was enjoying it. I partnered with a guy that had left the William Morris agency at the time, and I was standing on a set one night in Puerto Rico, and my wife, who was a studio executive from a rival studio, called me and said, "I have two pieces of news for you." And I knew the first one, which is somehow unbelievably, Lionsgate bought Artisan. Those of you film buffs, Artisan was the Blair Witch studio.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably should have bought Lionsgate, but in a jujitsu move, Lionsgate bought Artisan. And she said, "I don't want to work for you people." And I said, "Well, quite right. I don't work for us people anymore either." And she said, "The other thing is, we're going to have a baby." And I was like, "Way to bury the lead, honey."
Yeah, no kidding.
Typical studio executive. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, George, but I'm telling you, I heard a little voice in my head, and it said, "You've got to get off movie sets."
Mm-hmm.
And it just hit me. I got to change my life. If I'd seen enough people, go off the rails, living in hotel rooms 100 to 200 nights a year, and I loved it. I'd had a great run, and so I changed my life. And I had been a client of the firm that I've been working at for 15 years, and I wasn't thinking of going there, but I had a dinner with the chairman of the firm, who was a friend, and his wife, who's a legendary Broadway producer. And I told them, I was thinking of coming back to New York and maybe just developing screenplays. And Nell Nugent, who's Jolly and Stern's wife, I said, "What do you think this is, 1965? You're crazy. Stay out there. Keep making movies." And unfortunately, Jolly said, "With this change in life, you probably should have a change in career." And it took me about 18 months to think how and why I would want to be in insurance. And it started to make sense because I liked helping people, and I like getting people out of trouble. And I liked helping movies survive, especially independent art house films. And insurance is a very difficult thing for them, especially right now. So
Right.
I've had no regrets.
Yeah. Well, educate us, myself included, and all the viewers. Maybe pit some of the major differences between what you do as a senior VP of programming at a studio and what you're doing now in your capacity as an insurer.
So yeah, very different. As a studio executive, you're looking over a slate of films, and you're charged with, birthing them essentially. Some of them you fall in love with, others you're handed, and you have to do your best. But you're serving a distribution machine, and you're part of a team that is putting out content over the course of a year. So there's a real discipline to it. And I used to like to say to people that I was training, you may not like apple pie. That's fine. But you'd better be able to tell a good one. You'd better become an expert in apple pies, even if you don't like them. And that's part of the job of a studio executive, I think, part of the job, which is understanding a lot of different genres, not necessarily the ones that are closest and dearest to you, and having the discipline to help those shows. I think too many studio executives see themselves as the mover and the shaker. I never did, and I think the best executives are the ones that are facilitators and get out of the way. They're best at getting out of the way at the right moment. Mm-hmm. And there are many that I admired for doing that, that I learned a lot from. I think, as an insurance person, it depends. I was charged with, coming into a company that had a really wonderfully established name, lots of great brokers, but they didn't necessarily get along. And unbelievably to many people that have been listening to this potentially, I was hired for my diplomatic skills. So,
Are there
I
lots
was
of
able to
guffaws
help.
now from your teammates at Yale?
Maybe I'd be honored to think so. And bringing a team together and creating a bi-coastal risk team to really look after films. And insurance brokers tend to understand insurance really well, and not so much the making of the media. They get the business. But I made it a point to bring line producers in to talk to people on our team so they understood what was going on in pre-production, what a tech wreck meant, what was going on in the last 4 days, and why things could unravel and things, insurable events could occur. And so that they understood the post-production process, which has, of course, changed many, many times in the 15 years I've been doing this, to have some post people come in and educate our people so that they think and speak like the insureds, like our clients. So that's been my mission, which is to basically bring the curtain down between the risk side and the production side. And I've enjoyed dragging insurance executives to film festivals and making them pay for very nice parties for my clients so that they get to meet them. A lot of brokers are very afraid and never let the client meet the insurer. I'm just the opposite. They need to, that relationship needs to be humanized and trust built. So I think that the difference is, really in the pure creativity of being a studio executive, and the commerce of being an insurance person. But I think making teams work, not to sound too corny, but really motivating people to want to help each other is a similarity.
Well, that's excellent. And where does Peter go from here?
Well, I should have a third act, shouldn't I?
Well,
We'll see. Let's get through the pandemic. I've been working very hard on and was successful in starting a private insurance company for a great client that finances a lot of films out of the UK. And I believe it'll work, knocking on Formica here. And we'll see where that goes. I've, of course, toyed with the idea of going back and producing pictures again.
Weather's a little bit better.
I'm not so sure I'd move back to LA to do it. You don't need to anymore, that's for sure. I love California, and I do miss playing water polo out there and surfing and that life, but I'm not sure. I think I'd probably go the opposite direction toward Europe.
Okay, interesting. So
playing Croatia, really get my
there
head
you go.
handed to me.
Yeah, they got a lovely coastline there. So you could get a good coast and lots of good water polo, that's for sure.
That's what I was thinking.
So we've talked a bit about your college water polo career, and we've talked a bit about your business career. Our viewers would be interested if you could speak about how you feel your college water polo career has impacted your working career.
I'm going to hold up my cup, which says "For God, for country, and for Yale." You asked me to think about this, and two things came to mind the last couple of days. And one was that feeling I referred to earlier of being completely lost, totally at home in the water. I was a good surfer. I swam the 400 IM. I mean, I had pretty good 200 fly, really good 200 breast. But I was totally lost at first in water polo. And that feeling of being lost and finding your way, just slowly but surely, the game slows down a little bit incrementally as you see things third, fourth, fifth time. And having that faith that, okay, I have the skill set to do this. I just have to not despair. And I have to keep paying attention. I have to keep playing in the moment. It translated pretty well. Going out to LA was very disorienting. I'm very much a New Yorker, and I came out of the theater world, and it is not like Los Angeles at all.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're in your isolation pod a lot. People call those cars.
Yep.
And, it's just a different culture. It's a different way. You can't really tell when people like you or don't like you. You can't tell when you've had a good meeting or a bad meeting. Sometimes you can't tell who's the important person and who's not. And it was very difficult to understand who I needed to know and how did you deepen a relationship with someone in this culture. And I just thought, I've learned about story for most of my sentient life. That's the skill set I bring. And if I rely on that and I just am patient and take each day at a time and build relationships slowly, patiently, with respect, I'll get somewhere. And so I did. I think I took that sense of being completely lost in an element I felt so secure in from water polo. And when I went to LA, it was a similar experience, but I'd already done that. I'd already had a rehearsal for that.
Okay. Well, that's very good. Have you ever been in a situation where you suddenly stopped and you said to yourself, you know what? I can draw from that, whatever that is, from my college water polo career, and then it helped you deal with the situation. Has that ever happened?
It's funny. I didn't. There was one moment, and it was in my senior year, and I had drawn a 5-meter, and of course I gave the ball to the guy who was our best shooter in the team, and he refused to take it, and the team was like, no, you're going to do it this time. And I was petrified. I'd never shot a 5-meter, and
right.
I wasn't even really. I mean, I'd seen guys do it. It's like, wait a second, and I held the ball up and waited for the referee. And I guess I just misdirected. I looked that way and threw that way. And Chloe's like, what the hell was that? I mean, it went in, but I remember thinking, he just couldn't believe it. It was the most ridiculous shot.
Yep.
And I remember thinking the first time I pitched as a producer, a movie, and I had that same feeling. Whoa, I'm supposed to talk. I'm supposed to tell the idea. And I thought, well, the two people that I came in with are saying, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were much more experienced. And it was the same feeling that, you got to be kidding me. But it actually worked out. And we did sell that picture.
Well, that is a great example. Oftentimes, people who interview, they'll talk to somebody accomplished like yourself, and they'll say, you know what advice would you give your younger self? But I like to go about it the exact opposite way. I like to find out, what do you think that Yale College Water Polo Peter Marshall would say to advanced Hollywood producer / insurer Peter Marshall?
I think he would probably tell me to take more chances.
Okay. Well, who knows? Maybe you will. I mean, Europe's not that far away.
Wow, that was quite a question there, George.
Well, occasionally we throw one in, just to...
Yeah, I didn't see that coming. That was a backhand.
So the final question, we have people watching today that are high school students and players and their parents who are looking at colleges. And we have college players who are going to be looking at post-graduation careers and what to do next. What advice would you give to those people about how college water polo can relate to what you're going to do in your ultimate career?
Oh, I think water polo players have learned a lot of what swimmers have learned, which is that time is incremental. Swimmers and water polo players, track athletes, they don't think of a day as a long day. They think of it in terms of chunks and times, and keep that. The essence of time is so valuable, and being able to accomplish a lot in a day, in an hour, in a half hour is so important. And you've learned that's been drilled into you. Don't lose that. The other thing, and I love hiring swimmers and water polo players, because they have an arc to a season, more so swimmers, but there's a tapering of and getting in the championship season in water polo too. And keep that notion of immediate gratification that some people bring to their careers is erroneous. and it will lead you astray. Think in terms of the long game, the long season, and building, getting stronger, and earning the right to really take hold of something, whether it's at a bank or it's at a law firm. But I love the lesson of delaying gratification that swimming gave me. My water polo career was different, but I see it with the water polo players, the young ones that I see in Greenwich and at the AC. There's so much that they sacrifice and put into becoming the athlete that they are, and each season developing further. Keep that. Don't lose that.
Well, that's excellent advice. And he followed up his career at Yale as a college water polo player to become a very successful Hollywood producer, and then switched coasts and careers to get into the insurance business. Peter Marshall has been my guest today on CWPA Remote. Peter, thanks so much for sharing your insights on college water polo and ultimate working career.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me, George.
My pleasure too. Until next time on CWPA Remote, this is George Gross Jr. wishing all of our viewers the very best in and out of the pool.